everyone, it's Melody with Design by Melody. I have layout number 2 with my Felicity Jane Kit here. And as I mentioned in my last video, I'm going to really try to take the first couple minutes of each layout to kind of explain my design process, the decisions I'm making, and kind of the reasoning behind it. That way, those who may be new to scrapbooking can learn a little bit more. YouTube is really how I learned how to scrapbook, so I'm going to try to incorporate a little bit of that into my videos now. So last time I talked about the rule of thirds and doing a centered layout. And this time, there are really kind of two different techniques that I'm going to use. The first one is using multifunctional elements on a page, and then the second one is using stamping as a background. So what I mean whenever I'm talking about using multifunctional elements on a page, I'm really talking about using something that's decorative but also that's functional. So for example, there was this pocket that was in the Felicity Jane kit, and it was used for packaging, but it can also be used on a scrapbook page. So I'm going to actually use this pocket to store extra photos in. I'm going to use one photo on the layout, and then I have these two other photos that are the exact same day, just probably 20 seconds later. And I'm going to put that in this pocket. And I'm going to use that as a storage pocket, but also as a decorative element on my page. Now I'm actually going to flip this over so I can tack the flap down, and all that'll be here. You'll just be able to reach in and, these are backwards. You'll just be able to reach in and pull the photos out and see those. But really, there's only going to be one photo visible on the page. This other one is going to be a decorative item. Another way to do that is to use project life cards, such as this. Something like this, to where you'll use this as a decoration because it is a project life card, but you may use this as part of your title as well. So that's kind of having something multifunctional, using the card not just as an element but also as the title. So that's an idea as well. Now, another way to do it is also including memorabilia onto your page. Not only is it a decoration, but it's also a way to kind of keep that keepsake, such as a ticket to a movie or a ticket to a concert, or something your child has drawn you. You can use that as the background of your layout. Something like that, to where it's decorative, of course, and it adds to the visual. It's visually appealing, but it's also functional in the fact that you're able to keep it in your album, keep it safe and protected so that it doesn't get messed up. So those are just a couple of examples. So that's one technique I'm using, is using something as a multifunctional element on the page. The second design technique that I'm going to use is using a stamp as a background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this entire stamp set off of here, and I'm going to ink it up pretty much just as is. Don't think I'm going to move anything. I'll have to play around a little bit, but my idea is that I'm going to ink it up just as is. And I'm going to stamp it, and I'm going to use this as my photo mat, but I'm going to stamp this on the background, just like that. Now, I don't know exactly how that's going to work since it's a little bit smaller than my photo, but I'm going to play around with it. And the reason I'm choosing this stamp set in particular is because it says one day at a time, anything is possible, go for it. Reach for the stars, focus, this is going to be good, what's next? Keep moving forward. And in this photo, Kaylin is lifting weights. Now, we were just browsing around a store one day that's near our house. We walked up there just because it was a nice day, and he found these little weights and he's lifting them and playing with them. So it's kind of inspirational, one day at a time, anything is possible, go for it. So that's why I'm choosing to use that as my background. So those are pretty much the things I'm going to focus on in this layout. I'm going to go ahead and put you on fast forward and get into the designing of this page. Alright guys, thanks!
This layout came together pretty fast, mostly I think because it had already planned it out pretty well, just like I explained to you at the beginning. And also, there's not a whole lot added to this layout. I use a lot of stamping on this one, and it's kind of bold because it's in a black ink. So there wasn't a whole lot that needed to be added to this. First thing I'm going to do is actually cut down my photos, and there's the printing on the back from Snapfish, which is where I order my photos from. Plus I had made a couple notes to myself on the back. So I'm actually just going to cover these up with a bit of white cardstock. Totally not necessary, but why have something that's not pretty on the back? So I'm just going to cover it up with a bit of white. I totally could have put patterned paper on the back, but since, as I've mentioned in my last video, the pattern paper is starting to get a little slim, even just after my first layout, because I used so much on there. So I'm trying to conserve, and white cardstock is a bit in abundance around here, so I don't mind using that. And actually this was a piece of scrap anyway, so it was really no big deal at all. So I trimmed those down just to make the white borders even around the entire photo, and then backed it with a bit of white cardstock, and it fits right in that pocket perfectly. Now I've actually pulled out another piece of white cardstock to use as my background, and I'm putting this green, tealy green grid paper on the top of that. And I've just cut about a 1/2 inch off total, and then I centered it so it's got about a 1/4 inch border of white around the whole thing. Now, my photo I trimmed down a bit because I just didn't like all that extra space, and I wanted to make sure that there was enough space for the stamp set. So my idea originally, here we go. My idea originally was to leave the stamps on the plastic background, ink it up, flip it over, stamp it, voila, it's done. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. It's so flimsy that I just kind of put it down, and then when I start pressing down on it, I shift it a bit. And so, yeah, total fail. Didn't work at all. Like, totally did not work. So I decided to go ahead and cut it out. And this is actually a really easy paper to cut because you have lines. Very, very easy. But what I decided to do is take out this big, long stamp block and just line up the stamps that are on the edge, the ones that are a little bit more motivational and kind of uplifting sounding, and I'm just lining them up along the edge to use. And then I also line up kind of the thinner stamps to use on the top and the bottom. Excuse me. Since you're only going to see the edges, there really was no point in being able to stamp the middle. So I'm just inking it up with my Mementos Tuxedo Black, stamp it down, and it looks really good except for it missed the 2 middle stamps. So this is where I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm about tired of messing around with this, especially since I know exactly what I want. It just doesn't seem to be working. So I go ahead, take off the rest of the stamps, stamp those 2 in the center again, and then, it's good. I stamp my top one and my bottom one, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side, and I'm using those same stamps. And I'm just filling in a few of the little gaps with the tiny little star. So what they say are, and I've used, I don't know, probably like 8 or 9 of them. It says unstoppable, and then have the little star, go for it. Anything is possible. Be brave, one day at a time. Celebrate the little things. Reach for the stars. Focus. Keep moving forward. Yep, and that's it. And I just use each of those 2 times or so. And then I put my photo right in the middle, and it's perfect. You can see around it. You could you could read the stamps if you want to, but I'm using it more as a design element as the background with kind of a small hidden message of, motivational words. And so I'm going to put that right to the right side of my little stamp pocket. Excuse me. I felt like the photo wasn't quite as separated from the stamping, so I just add a tiny little white border, and then I'm pretty much calling it good. At some point though, I look at it and I'm like, there's just not a separation between the photo or the stamped background and the grid background. So I decided to go ahead and mat it on this white and black polka dot paper, and I just trimmed down the edges a bit so all of the edges overlap a polka dot, so there's a slight black border around. And this is a very subtle way to make that photo in stamping stand off the background. I could have done a solid black border around it, but that would have been very, very bold, and I didn't necessarily need anything quite that bold. I just needed it to be where you could see the distinction between the paper that was stamped on and the background paper. So going right along with the black, white, and teal theme, I go ahead and pull out my little card here that I'm going to use as my journaling spot. And note of caution, love these papers. They're great, but you can't really erase on them because it starts to pull the color up. So I'm layering these little banner type shapes here in the top left corner of my little journaling spot. And I know I'm going to use one of these flare badges at the bottom. So I decided, okay, well, let me go ahead and get my journaling down because I can't write on it once the flare badge is on it. So I go ahead and draw my lines with the pencil. I'm going to do my journaling in my black Sharpie just like I did on my last layout. And then I try to erase my pencil, and oh boy, does it start to fade that teal. So I immediately stop and I'm thinking, okay, what can I do? Because I've got my journaling with these pencil lines. So I decided to go ahead and overlap the pencil lines with just some lines drawn in a pen. And my journaling says, Kaylin found these weights one day while browsing around. He immediately picked them up and started testing his own ability. He's ready for any challenge, which is why I wanted to have those motivational words, because it just falls right in line with the journaling. And this is where I'm adding those lines with my pen. I didn't want to add the lines in the Sharpie because I felt like that would like blend too much with the journaling, but the pen kind of has a little bit of a contrast because it's a different thickness than the Sharpie pen. I'm going to add a few of these little acrylic arrows, and I really didn't know what to do with these when we got them. I felt like they were just little tiny like extra pieces that were cut off of something, but I'm really liking them. They're a great way. They're pretty dimensional though, but they are a great way to kind of point to something in a very subtle way, which is exactly how I use them. Now, because I am going to use them and they're slightly more dimensional, it's very easy to go ahead and use the flare badge, because the flare badge and those little acrylic arrows are exactly the same height. And I am going to use two other acrylic pieces on this layout. So having a couple of things that are all dimensional is not that big of a deal. If there was only one thing on the page that was real dimensional, I probably would have put it on the outside of the page protector. But since there are a couple things, they're all the same height, I'm obviously just going to leave it on the inside of the page protector. Now this flare badge says right now. And as you can see, kind of to recap my design thought, I still have my multifunctional element here, which is this pocket, and then I have the stamping as a background. So I've already accomplished both those things. Now I'm just kind of completing the decoration. Now, you saw me pull off that reinforcement on the other side of the pocket. It was just adding a bit of a bump there, and so I go ahead and take it off, and then I'm also cutting off the flap. The flap didn't look quite as good to me. When I originally did it, I thought, oh, I'll just tack this down, I'll just, it'll look cute. Yeah, it didn't look so cute, so I went ahead and just cut it off. And I'm going to layer my black vellum heart right over on top of the little envelope, and then do my little teal label. And what it says is I stamped a star, and then I put more photos, ... Now these vellum pieces are not as transparent as some that I've used in the past, so you can use your regular glue runner on the back, and you can't see it at all through the layout, or not through the layout, through this heart. Excuse me. And then add another one of those little acrylic plus signs right here. Now if you notice, I'm going to point this out now, and you'll see me actually address it later, but I have my envelope at a diagonal, and then I have my journaling block straight up and down. So whenever I go to adhere my photo later, I debate whether to have it kind of askew like it is right now, or whether to have it lined up. And I end up lining it up because I felt like it was funny with only one thing on the layout lined up straight. So I decided to have the photo block also lined up straight. And then this is my little title block, and since it's going right below the envelope with my more photos, I felt like it needed to be kind of askew, just the same as the photo envelope. And what this says is I am unstoppable, and then I'm putting this today acrylic piece, so it's going to say today I am unstoppable. And I used the unstoppable is one of those stamps that's from the stamp set. And so it kind of ties the stamping to the rest of the layout. It's not just some random stamping that uses the background. It actually ties it to the rest of the layout. And those alpha, the alpha that I use for the I am, is actually from an LE Studio teal set. I think it's like teal letters and numbers. I just use the lowercase pieces. Now you see me trimming right here, and it's hard to see it off camera, but I'm just trimming out the star. It was in a little circle sticker, and so I just trimmed out the star piece because I didn't really need to put the whole sticker down, the whole circle sticker. And then I'm going to stamp two little stars off to the side here. And this is just to help that stamping flow across the page. Now, just as I felt with the photo block, I felt like it was blending into the background a little bit too much. So I go ahead and mat it on a piece of this black and white polka dot paper as well. And then I am going to round the corners just like I did on the title block itself. Now this is pretty much going to finish this layout just like I did on my last video. If you watch that, stay tuned at the end. I will be giving you kind of a recap of what I did and how I addressed those design elements like I mentioned at the very beginning. And you could see when I flipped over that photo block, I used the part of the stamping that I messed up. So I used the polka dot side of that part. So that piece of paper is not going to go to waste at all. It's definitely going to get used. And then I'm using some of these wood veneer stars to kind of bring in a bit of that craft color into the rest of the page. And this is pretty much going to finish it up, except for I forgot to put my little word stickers at the top of my photo, and they just say hello starting today. And that is it. That's all I've added. All right, thank you guys. Stay tuned for the recap.
Okay, I've got the completed layout here. So there were the two design techniques that I was kind of focusing on for this layout. The first one was having some sort of multifunctional element on a page, such as a card that you use as a title, a pocket that you use for extra photos or hidden journaling, or memorabilia that you can use as a decoration, but as well as a way to keep the item, kind of like a keepsake. And then the second one was to use stamps to create a background. So I did both of those. This is my multifunctional item. It was a pocket, and of course I use it as a decoration. It brought in a darker color. I found that there was a little bit too much white and this minty teal color, and I did need a darker element, so I added a couple of spots of black as well. But this dark craft colored envelope really helped. Now my thought at first was just to tack the flap down, but it was too bulky, so I decided to cut that off and just use it this way, and I added the little paper clip here as well. The second thing that I was focusing on was using stamps to create a background, and I was going to stamp it directly from the stamp sheet, but it was too flexible, and I ended up double stamping, or having to double stamp this stamp, and so it was it double stamped a little bit, not a big deal, but I ended up taking off and putting on a block, which actually worked a little bit better because I can make sure it was all lined up on the side. And then whenever I did that, well, actually the first one was on the back side of this, which you can't see, and then whenever I lined it up on a block, the middle ones didn't stamp properly, so I ended up just doing them single stamping with a smaller block. But I really like the way that that turned out. You can see some of them go for it, anything is possible, unstoppable, moving forward, keep moving forward, you know, so on and so forth. But I really like the way that that is. It really offsets the photo. One other thing I was going to mention is I have these two things kind of lined up as a diagonal, and these two things more lined up straight. No real rhyme or reason other than I like the way that the diagonal looked, but I started to put this as a diagonal as well, but since I had done my journaling straight, I needed to line it up straight. It just didn't look balanced. But that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. This completes the second project with my Felicity Jane January Kit, and stay tuned. The next project is actually going to be a Project Life page. Thanks again. Bye.